Sound off with me, folks, on the Boston Celtics, picking up right where they left off last season when they won their 18th NBA championship. And wait, hold on. They didn't pick up where they left off because it actually looked like they're even better. Listen, it was banner night at TD Garden. Before we jump into all of it, I just want to say to everyone out there, we've got a new feed for Sound Off on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Please go and subscribe there. We will have this episode coming out every night after every game right to that feed. So please go and subscribe there. And if you're on YouTube, click subscribe to our channel. Make sure you're getting every latest video that comes through from us, the Boston Celtics. Now, let's dive in to Banner 18. Banner night at TD Garden. It started out with a ton of emotion. Listen, it was the excitement when the parade happened. Tonight was the emotion. You had Bob Cousy on hand. I've been here this is my 17th season. I couldn't tell you the last time I remember Bob Cousy being in the building for a game. On top of that, you had the big three coming back with Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and Ray Allen. You had Cedric Maxwell out there. Those guys bringing the trophy out and handing it off to Al Horford and Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and meeting out at center court. It was emotional. And now it didn't reach the level of emotion that Paul Pierce had back in 2008 when he literally shed tears when he received his ring. But you move on from that moment. Whit Grousbeck gives an awesome speech to the crowd, and then it's time for the rings to be handed out. And it was awesome. Those rings are gigantic. They are beautiful. If you haven't seen them, you can look on the Celtics social media pages. It's blasted everywhere. They're beautiful. They literally are gigantic. I mean, these look huge on 7-footers' hands, on 6'8" people's hands. Just imagine what it would look like on a normal person's hand. So they get their rings. Jason Tatum gives a nice speech to the crowd and says, hey, to the best fans in the world, waits a minute. Let's go do it again. And then right after that, they go and they raise that 18th banner up into the rafters. And that was a moment that I think all of us are going to remember, especially those players and those coaches, that they were literally raising history up into the rafters. I asked Joe Mazzulla very recently about that moment and was he going to allow himself to enjoy it. He said, yes, that is a moment I'm going to allow myself to enjoy because every time I come to TD Garden, I look up at those rafters, I look up at those banners, and I see the void. And tonight is the night that we're going to be able to make our mark in the history books by raising up and filling that void with the 18th banner. So it was an emotional pregame ceremony. It was amazing to have all of those legends back on the court at the same time, kind of passing on the baton, literally through the trophy, the Larry O'Brien trophy, passing it on and then letting these new guys celebrate in front of the crowd. It was amazing. The crowd was awesome. The energy was at an all-time high. And like I said, it was emotional. It was emotional for everyone involved. And I guarantee those guys they're in the locker room right now probably looking at those rings and finally getting their real first look at those things after having it just for a couple minutes out on the court. And somehow, I don't know how they did it, but they just turned the page and 10 minutes later, they tip off a game to open up the NBA season against arguably the second most talented team in the NBA, top to bottom, behind the Celtics. And all they did is completely dismantle the Knicks. The final score being 132-109. And ladies and gentlemen, it felt much worse than that. The Celtics were raining threes all night long, made a franchise record 29 of them on opening night, somehow did not break the record. They missed their final 13. If they made one more, they would have become the first team in NBA history to ever make 30 or more three-pointers in a regular season game. So it didn't happen, but it was an impressive performance nonetheless. Jason Tatum was on another level. I mean, you want to talk about a guy who seems to be motivated and seems to have done some work during the offseason to get even better. That's the guy. Like, he looks motivated, like he wants to take over the NBA. And not really doing it with a type of basketball, of like a me basketball. This just happened within the flow of the game. He didn't make the offense revolve around him. He just capitalized on every opportunity he had. 14 of 18 from the field, 8 of 11 from three-point range. Just an unbelievable performance from Jason Tatum. He had a 37-point double-double, also had 10 assists, and all that time only committed 1 turnover. He was exceptional. I tweeted this out during the game. That was one of the best individual offensive performances I've ever seen in person with my own eyes, and since I started covering the NBA 16 years ago. It's really an incredible performance, and if this is a sign of things to come, the league is in trouble. I heard a whisper in the back hallway as I was leaving to come up here to record this podcast. I'm not going to say who I heard it from, but someone in the back hallway mentioned all of the disrespect that Jason Tatum dealt with during the offseason. We don't need to dive into that, but the fact that I heard that certainly says that he remembers it, he acknowledges it, and he wants to use it to motivate him to have what very well could be a career year this season. That's saying a lot for a guy who's made 3 straight first-team All-NBA teams. On top of that, I mean, the rest of the team shot the ball well. I mean, all 5 starters scored 11 or more points. They all shot well from three-point range. They rebounded the ball well. It stood out to me. They were offensive rebounding. I mean, the team grabbed 11 offensive rebounds tonight during this game, many of them being off of missed three-pointers. So clearly, it's an emphasis that if we're going to miss three-pointers, we are going to attack and try to grab the rebounds. And sometimes those rebounds are what lead to even more quality three-pointers right after that. And we saw that in tonight's game. The defense was very strong from start to finish. The numbers don't necessarily say that, with the Knicks shooting 55% from the field, but you could see that the Celtics had moments where they could just apply themselves and basically stop the Knicks from doing anything that they wanted to do. And again, this is a Knicks team that is incredibly talented. Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, Karl Anthony Towns now on the team, OG Anunoby. There is talent there, like high-level talent across the board, and they weren't getting anything easy for the high majority of this game. There was one moment where the Celtics, I think they were up by about 30 points. They had just made some crazy number of three-pointers in the game, and somehow the defense still had enough energy to force an 8-second violation and a turnover. Think about that. Team is up by 30 points. It's shooting three-pointers at a literal all-time record pace at that moment in the game, and yet they still had the level of effort defensively to force an 8-second violation out of the Knicks. That's a team that's motivated and ready to try to do this again, just like Jason Tatum said before the game. He wants this team to try to repeat and try to do it again, and all the boys seem to be on board with that. All right, we've got a few comments from our fans coming in tonight. The first one is from William Otway about kind of giggling at just how great the Celtics were tonight. Our second one is from Jason Bateman, not that Jason Bateman, talking about the Celtics being apex predators. And our last comment of the night coming in from Alan Acosta, always being a part of this show. We appreciate you, Alan Acosta, talking about the three-point shooting and especially the defense that we just touched on. So let's jump into our first comment tonight. This one's coming in from William Otway. All right, William Otway, his tweet comes in saying, "It got to the point where I was just kind of giggling. It was stunning to watch." And listen, I was sitting up there in press row in the media section, and my mind kept rewinding to Game 1 of the NBA Finals when Kristaps Porzingis checked into the game. A guy who had missed, 6 straight weeks, checks into the highest profile environment that you could possibly be involved in the NBA, and that is in the NBA Finals. Missed 6 weeks, checks in, and all he does is torch the Mavs. I mean, it was like everything that left his fingers was going in. And it felt that way tonight with the entire Celtics team from beyond the three-point arc. It was like every shot they took, it felt like it was going in. And for a while, that was almost the case. They were shooting about 60% from three-point range for the entire night until that final stretch when they missed their final 13. Listen, they wound up finishing this game having shot 47.5% from three-point range. That's great in and of itself. They did that after missing their final 13 three-pointers of the game. So that just goes to show you just how on fire they were all night long. Literally just took my mind back to that moment with Kristaps Porzingis in Game 1. He couldn't miss, he could do no wrong, and that's what it felt like with the Celtics tonight. This team set an all-time record for offense last season, the highest offensive rating in NBA history. Something tells me, and this performance tells me, and all of us, that record might be in danger this year because this team might be even better. All right, next comment coming in from Jason Bateman. Again, not that Jason Bateman. I wish. Hey, Jason, if you want to be a part of this, feel free to contact my people. But, all right, he says, Apex Predators, basketball nirvana. The Jays are taking the league in a real way. Apex Predators. Let's go one by one here. Apex Predators. That's what it felt like tonight. Like, you would have expected the Knicks, who came to TD Garden and watched the Celtics receive their rings, watched the Celtics raise that banner into the rafters, hearing the crowd, thinking, that's what I want. Like, that's what I want to get to. You would have thought that the Knicks were the Apex Predators coming into this game because they wanted to be the team on attack and saying, I want what you've got. But instead of that happening, it was the team who's coming off the win who was the team who was attacking, saying, I want that again. It was incredibly impressive the way that the Celtics took this game. Both ends of the court, again, we're going to talk about that a little bit more later in the show, but both ends of the court, efficient offense, like picking the Knicks apart. The new look Knicks, who are loaded with talent across the board. A team that seemingly was created, talent-wise, to contend with these Celtics. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Derek White, Drew Holiday. You've got a bunch of wings and perimeter players who can dominate. Well, what did the Knicks go and do? They got OG Anunoby, an incredible defensive player and a pretty darn good offensive player as well. They got Mikal Bridges, an incredible defensive player, a pretty darn good offensive player as well. It was like they were building this team to compete with the Celtics, and yet the Celtics came out on opening night and absolutely drubbed them, picked them apart. Apex Predators, that's what the Celtics look like tonight. In basketball nirvana, I love that term because that's what it feels like while you're watching these Celtics play. It's like the ball is on a string. Everyone knows where everyone's going to be at every moment of the game. Very rarely do you see the Celtics make a team mistake, and you can see that evidenced by tonight. 4 turnovers. 4 in the entire game. These guys have brought back basically the exact same team from last season, and it certainly looks it early on. And I'm not talking about just tonight. You saw it in the preseason. This team went 4-1 in the preseason, looked great, looked like they didn't skip a beat after their offseason, and here they are tonight looking even better than they were last year. Guys have improved, and yet still that chemistry still seems to be there at a very, very high level. So certainly, no question, as Jason Bateman said here, basketball nirvana. And lastly, the Jays are taking the league in a real way. We might be seeing 2 guys getting votes for MVP this season on the Boston Celtics. Tonight, Tatum was the guy. He put forth, as I said, one of the best offensive performances I've ever seen in person in my time covering the league. And that's not just about the Celtics. That's about anyone that I've seen play. But tonight, 37, 10, and only 1 turnover. He also chipped in 4 rebounds and a steal during the game, and also a block shot. But then you look next to him, and Jaylen Brown, he also scored 23 points. He only played 29-plus minutes. And it wasn't his best performance, but one thing that I take from it, he shot only 7 of 18 from the field. One thing that I take is 5 of 9 from long range. Tatum's shot looked great from three-point range. We've all seen it. Drew Hanlon working with him in the offseason. It seems like that thing is fixed. Kevin O'Connor, shout out KOC. He tweeted about it during the game tonight. That thing looks like it is fixed completely. Not that it was ever broken, but just in terms of any room for improvement, I think it's been made. But Jaylen Brown, this is a guy who has not shot 40% from three-point range. The numbers have dropped a little bit for the last few seasons as his attempts have gone up. If he can shoot in the upper 30s this season, that makes the Celtics so much more dangerous. And tonight he opens up 5 of 9 from three-point range, made all of his free throws as well during the game. So you've got Jason and Jaylen, the Jays, who just finally reached, we use the word apex, they reached the apex of the NBA back in June by winning a championship for the first time in their careers, and now they've come back possibly looking even better. As he said, Jason Bateman, the Jays are taking the league in a real way, it's scary to think about what these guys could possibly do as they just start to enter their prime together. All right, our last one of the night coming from our longtime listener, Alan Acosta, saying, everyone will talk about the three-point shooting. And by the way, we should. It was incredible. It was record-breaking. But the defense was working tonight. If we defend this well, we could win 65 games. 65 wins is difficult to come by anytime in the NBA, especially when there's so much talent dispersed amongst the NBA right now. I think it's possible that the Celtics win fewer games this season than they did last season, but overall be a better team. I know that doesn't really make sense when you first hear it, but I think that we can see that happen simply because there's so many good teams in the NBA right now. There's so much talent across the board. It's hard to win 65 games. But it's possible. And as Alan said, if they defend the way that they defended tonight, and again, the numbers don't even say it was a great defensive night. New York shot 55% from the field, 37% from three-point range, and they got to the line for 16 attempts, shot 75% there. But the Celtics forced 12 turnovers. It just feels like when the Celtics want to, they can turn it up another notch defensively that no other team in the league can reach. And that's because you've got all defensive player after all defensive player. And listen, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have not gotten that honor. They have not been selected as all defensive. They are all defensive level players. Jaylen Brown got screwed last season by not being on that list. And he's made it be known that he didn't like that. And that's great. That's a motivator for him. Jason Tatum could also very well make a team like that with the all-defensive team. They are both so talented, and they put in the effort. You don't always see the leading superstar of a team playing both ways, all the time. The Celtics have two of them that do that. And then you add that to, obviously, the all-defensive players from last season, Derek White, Drew Holiday. They're going to be there again. They haven't lost a step defensively. And then you've got all reliable Al Horford in the back. And by the way, let me just talk about the other reserves that come in, especially at center. Kristaps Porzingis, a great shot blocker around the rim, a great deterrent for the Celtics last season around the rim defensively. Well, he's out for the foreseeable future. Al Horford started tonight, and then Luke Cornett and Xavier Tillman came in off the bench, and they were both excellent. I'll shout out Kevin O'Connor again because he also said something else tonight that I thought was great. He said Luke Cornett is one of the best backup centers in the league. And you know why that's the case? It's because Luke Cornett knows his role. He doesn't try to stray outside of that. He knows what his strengths are, and that's what he tries to soar with. And he just has gotten better and better every year that he's been here in Boston. I don't know how the Celtics got him to come back after entering free agency this offseason, but he came back, and now he looks even better. He's impactful, even more impactful than he was last season. So, yes, Kristaps Porzingis is out, but the Celtics are still loaded with defensive players who can protect the rim and protect the perimeter. Luke Cornett is one of those guys around the rim. Xavier Tillman is one of those guys around the rim and on the perimeter. He's incredibly versatile. And then you've got Al Horford, who continues to be versatile. He's been doing it his entire career. He can switch on to anyone. He can also block some shots at the rim. It's just an incredible defensive team that's been put together and coming back together. Add in Xavier Tillman for an entire season. Remember, he just got here in February last year at the trade deadline. All those guys come back. The team is even more cohesive. The offense is going to be great. They might set new records to upend last season, but the defense, that is going to win championships. We saw it in the finals. The defense was awesome. Jaylen Brown really just sometimes asserting himself and taking the ball away from Luka Doncic and just forcing misses. The Celtics have guy after guy after guy who could make an all-defensive team, and that is going to be what makes this team great, possibly even greater than what we saw last season when this team got to the very tippy top and won Banner 18. So That's a wrap for tonight. It was an incredible first game and opening night at TD Garden. The banner went up. The rings went out. They are gigantic. I can't wait to see one in person and be able to feel how heavy they are, to look at the bling and the shine of those rings. I can't wait for you all to continue to watch this team play. Again, the team is back on the court in just a couple nights, so stay tuned in, all right? The season came quick, and it's going to move quick. So stay tuned here with Sound Off. We're coming out every night on YouTube with the videos, at least for home games, and every single night home and away will be coming out on the Sound Off with the Boston Celtics podcast feed on iHeartMedia. So go search, download, subscribe, and can't wait to see you in a couple nights when the Celtics are back on the court for Game 2.